Good evening. Welcome to tonight's shiur, Thursday of Parshas Shoftim, Tov Shin Pei Hey, going between Dalad Elul and Hey Elul. So a few points. One is about Selichos, and just to point out haven't noticed it, we mentioned in the main focus of the Selichos is the invoking the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, the 13 attributes of mercy. This is where you have the question in the famous Maimon of Torah of Anila Doidi. Why is if it's a time of revelation of the 30 Midos of Rachamim, why is it not a Yom Tov? So this is going back to the Minhag HaSfardim. Minhag HaSfardim is to say Selichos throughout the month of Elul. So they're saying, and the focus of Selichos is you give Midos Rachamim. So we say in Selichos we have the Yud Gimel Midos Rachamim come up 4 times. That's the general format. And so here we have on the screen that sometimes it's Keil Melech Yeshiv Rachamim, and sometimes it's Keil Erech Apayim Ato. So just to help you, the first time it's going to be Keil Erech Apayim Ato. That's a couple of pages after the beginning. Selichos starts with Ashrei, Kaddish, and then a page of a collection of psukim, and perhaps another piyut, and then Keil Erech Apayim is near the beginning. Then typically there's going to be 3 more times where Yud Gimel Tzarachim are mentioned, and those other 3 times is Keil Melech Yoshev. And so I'm not focusing on the days of the fast days, which also you have this switch over. Sometimes it's Keil Melech Yoshev, sometimes it's Keil Erech Apayim Ato. I didn't check into that today. So what's the logic? Why is it sometimes one, sometimes the other? So someone here, some article in contemporary journal says the logic is fairly straightforward. It says in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah that when we recite the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, then we awaken Hashem's mercy. And instead of being on the throne of judgment, Hashem Kivyochel moves to the throne of mercy. So therefore, we start off the Selichos. We start off with the Keil Melech Apayim Ato, and then we've said Yud Gimel Tzarachim. Once we've said the Yud Gimel Tzarachim once, so then the understanding is that we've already been caused the Eibishter's presence to be no longer Al Kisei Din, but rather Al Kisei Rachamim. And therefore, from that point onwards, it's Keil Melech Yoshev Al Kisei Rachamim. And that's how it remains for the rest of the Selichos. That's generally. There are some exceptions, which in this article he mentions, but a fairly simple explanation. Okay, whilst we already have this on the page, I just want to share with you something which I don't have the answer. So this is composed in a rhyme format. So there's ato, nekreso, hoireso. So that's meant to be rhyming. First 3, then chasadecho, yudidecho, berachamim, horachamim, nekadem, mikedem. All of these are meant to be rhyming. I know we say this every day, unless there's a reason not to say Tachanun. And so they have kesel kvachem nisloy, nachon nisloydon, vayed Hashem be'onon. So again, they're meant to be rhyming. I've been bothered by why does this phrase why does it need to have a vav there? It can be why does it have the vav hachiba as if it's the middle of a sentence following on from something else? It's not a lashon of a pasuk. It's the words of a poet. I don't have the answer. Okay, fine. Let's go on to the time for Selichos. People ask to clarify. So we know that in Chabad, Selichos is from Chatzos. The first Selichos is from midnight onwards, after midnight. And because of summertime, so therefore midnight is at 1 o'clock. And we hear some shuls do it 12 o'clock, some do it even earlier. So to understand where we're coming from, etc. So here's a note of the Rebbe. This is, as you can see, it was first published in a Kuntras, a reminder of the Frierdiker Rebbe, subsequently in Sefer Minhagim. Haslichas Aleph, the first Selichos, we begin after, but close after Chatzos Laila. So this, there could be several options. Why don't we leave it for Sunday morning? Why dafka midnight? And then there's the other question is, why dafka midnight? Why not earlier? But meanwhile, I think the Rebbe is addressing why is it after midnight rather than in the morning. So kanir mipnei she'oimrim b'metzoi menucha. Because we have the central poem of the Selichos, the first night is Motzei Menucha, and therefore we want to have it as close to Shabbos as possible. So we've come out of Shabbos, so b'Motzei Ein oimrim Selichos v'gimus rachmim koidim chatzos laila. Selichos aren't said before midnight. Now this second point, he gives a reference to Mogen Avram. Tovkov Chafei is a typo. It's Tovkov Samachay, where we can see that in a minute. The in of Selichos being dafka after Chatzos. So let's scroll down to the Mogen Avram. Do I have it? No. Do I? Right. So this is. What's that? There was Tov Kuf Samachay. So I don't have it on the screen. All right. So there seems to be something here about not saying Selichos before midnight, and that's got to do with the inyan of dinim, gvura, and at night we don't say Tachanun because it's a time of din and gvura. Therefore, we don't want to compound that by saying Tachanun, etc. So that seems to be the svara of waiting till after Chatzos. And that would be true any day of the week. If you wanted to say Selichos at night, it would have to be after midnight. Motzei Shabbos, there's another reason for waiting to after midnight. And this is, you can see here on the screen from the Sha'arei Tshuva in Siman Shin. That's the Siman in Shulchan Aruch which talks about Malav Malka. It's a one-liner. There he brings from the Chido, from the Rebbe Zakuta, B'Shem Arizal. One shouldn't be saying Viduy on Motzei Shabbos until after Chatzos, because until Chatzos there's still Kedushas HaShabbos. So when people know that from Motzei Shabbos and Krishma Shalamitov is before Chatzos, you don't say Viduy and you don't say Tachanun in Krishma Shalamitov Motzei Shabbos until Chatzos. So that would be also a reason not to start Selichos before Chatzos. Once until Chatzos is more time of dinim, and then after Chatzos, since the darkness is lifting, it just becomes more in the line of Chesed. Okay, now then there is a minhag of some to do Selichos earlier. And you can see here on the screen, I've got from the Sefer Mishmeres Sholem, from the Koidnover. And he says, those people who find it difficult to get up early for Selichos, they can say it at Chatzos. And those who find it difficult to wait till Chatzos, or they won't get a minyan then, they can do Selichos from 10 p.m., 10 hours after Chatzos Hayoim, 2 hours before Chatzos. This is the Koidnover, Chassidus Rebbe, and his basis is actually from the Alter Rebbe. So whilst we've seen quite strong language of Osulei Mavidui till Chatzos, but here we're seeing from the Alter Rebbe, as I say, he is bringing, this Koidnover is building from the Alter Rebbe. Let's read this carefully. This is in Tikkuch Chatzos. Although the appropriate time, the choice time for Tikkuch Chatzos would be Chatzos Samiti, not like the Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham has got a whole interesting approach how to work out Chatzos 6 hours after sunset, and that would fluctuate according to winter and summer. The Alter Rebbe says no, it has to be midnight mamish, which is 12 hours after midday, which means the moment where there's the shortest shade. Okay. Now, Afal Pikain, says the Alter Rebbe, Ein Zel Yaakov, Elo Tchilas Manahi mit Tchilas Hashmoid HaTichoina. The Alter Rebbe now has got flexibility with Chatzos. But although midnight mamish is the ideal, but you've got the whole middle third of the night would be also allowable. That's 2 hours before Chatzos Samiti, B'kayitzu B'choyref. So now the Alter Rebbe has given some flexibility on Tikkun Chatzos, that it can be from 2 hours before. So whilst we have this language of not doing any Tachanun but before Chatzos, well, the Alter Rebbe has allowed Chatzos to be stretched for 2 hours before. So this is the basis of the minig of some, and I heard that in Ger or some communities they do Chatzos, they take Selichos at night, and they do it at 10 o'clock, or perhaps depending on the summertime. But there is this basis of doing Selichos at 10 o'clock at night, because then already it's Korev to Chatzos, it's the middle third of the night. So that would allow doing Selichos before Chatzos. But that doesn't help us for Motzei Shabbos. That's what I was showing you here. The Motzei Shabbos is a different, any other week, a day of the week, yes. So this man of dinim is already 2 hours before Chatzos, is not such as man of dinim. When it comes to Motzei Shabbos, then you've got the hashur, you've got the presence of Shabbos until Chatzos. So then I don't think you have that flexibility. That's the way I understand. And indeed, that's our minhag, that we wait till midnight mamish, and shortly thereafter. That's clearly our minhag. The flexibility would be possibly other days of the week. Let's move on. So two people separately this past week asked me whether it's okay to blow. They were asked to blow shofar, and it dragged on. It's already after Shkia, almost some kind of event, and they'd asked him to blow shofar, but the schedule dragged on. It was already after Shkia, and then I was in a Beis Chabad, and a girl came in, a seminary girl. She asked, could we blow shofar for her? It was a few minutes after Shkia. So I answered that that's not a problem, because here you have in the Torah, he says, the old minig Ashkenaz was to blow shofar after Shachris and after Ma'ariv. This is what the Torah writes, and the Divrei Nehemiah brings it also in Siman Tov Kuf Pei Aleph. Despite that, this is in the Torah, and the little Aleph over there is a symbol for the Darkei Moshe. That's the Ramos commentary on the Torah, and he says, despite what seems to be an earlier minig Ashkenaz to blow shofar after Ma'ariv as well as after Shachris, but the later minig is to blow only at Shachris. I'd like to explore this minig a little bit. What happened, Mikora Makasova, Sev Makasova, possibly is the following. In Ashkenaz, it was very, very normal to daven Ma'ariv early. That was the standard behavior. Ad Kedei Kach that they don't even have a Kaddish before Ma'ariv, because it's come straight after a Mincha. There's a Kaddish at the end of Mincha, whether it's the Kaddish Sholem or Kaddish Yosem, straight Borchu and straight into Ma'ariv, because they would daven Ma'ariv early. As a result, so before I get to that, so now, if I've been talking about that there's a concern of Gvura and Dinim by night, I can see a strong svara that a shofar is Hayitaka shofar be'irva amla yechrodu. It's a similar. I have no marker for this, but just the idea of any charoda seems to be out of sync with doing it by night. So I can see that's why they were asking the question. But in Ashkenaz, they used to daven Ma'ariv early. It was still daytime, so they would blow shofar after Ma'ariv also. That would be the explanation for the earlier minhag. But then the Maramo, who's also Ashkenaz, but at a later stage, he says that they only blow Shachris. Possibly they were taking the view. It's true they were still davening Ma'ariv early, but if we really daven Ma'ariv in Halocho, it's considered Laila. Once it's Laila, we shouldn't be saying Tachanun. This is possibly the changeover. Interesting that our meaning is to say L'Dovid Hashem Oiri at Shachris and Mincha, whereas in Nusach Ashkenaz the meaning is to say L'Dovid Hashem Oiri after Ma'ariv rather than after Mincha, and that also might be related because of the minig. Because generally we're not encouraging Tilim Balaylo, but because they daven Mincha. I'm sorry, daven Ma'ariv Mibed Yom, so therefore to say Tilim it's still Mibed Yom, and also Lagabe Beis Ovel Rahman Litzlan. Kapitel Memtes is by Ashkenaz is after Ma'ariv. That's another point is that in Ashkenaz, as I said, there's no space between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Therefore, to say put in the Dovid Hashem Oiri or the Kapitel Memtes after Mincha, there's no space for it to go one after the other. That could be the Svara Hin and Aher. So there is a Svara not to blow shofar by night. But all right, if it's shortly after Shkia, we'll see in a moment. There's a little room for flexibility. It's a nishgefel. First of all, it's a Kaddish to say that there is an issue bichlal, and then Suffolk, the Yevet. All right. So now this brings me to the question bichlal of saying Tachanun after Shkia. So this is now from Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, the dinim of Tachanun. So the Alter Rebbe writes, Ein nefilas apayim balayla. We don't do nefilas apayim, that's why we put our head down in Tachanun, mitam hayodua leyodim. There's a reason. That's the Alter Rebbe's euphemism for al pikabol. Shulchan Aruch, when he says hayodua leyodim, those who know, that means al pikabol. Therefore, if Mincha drags on until Laila, one shouldn't do Nefilas Apayim after Mincha. And if you're seeing now in Ashkenaz, apparently Avinu Malkeinu comes before Nefilas Apayim, therefore he says skip Avinu Malkeinu so that you should be able to say Tachanun before too late. Then the Alter Rebbe adds, Omikom Mokim Ein Lochush Lozeh. This thing of not saying Tachanun is only by night, but Ben Hashmoshes is okay. Now this is the basis. If you know that in many other communities, after Shkia they might be davening and mincha a bit late. After Shkia Zokmensh can Tachanun, and some in Chabad has become. Well, that's what the Alter Rebbe says here, yeah? Now, but let's read further. Also the custom is Nefilas Apayim Beleil Ashmuros Hoyel Vu Korev Leyeh. Now, in Selichos, as they're talking about Leil Ashmuros, when you get up early, for Selichos, so it's minhag to say is to have Nefilas Apayim. Then why? It's still Laila. The original minhag is to say Selichos was it's still night. Why? Because it's Korev L'Yom. Okay. But yes, Nohagin. So we've seen here that if it's not full-fledged Laila, only so then you can say Tachanun by Ben Hashmoshes time. But yes, Nohagin. However, there are those who have a minhag. Lahadich b'slichos, to draw out the slichos ad noch in hayom until it's clearly day. Mi'oz neiflim al pneihem. And so Tachanun in the Nefilas Apayim in slichos is right at the end, yeah, just before Macheo Maseh Bayom David El Gol. That's towards the end. So there are those who have the minhag that they work out the slichos that Tachanun and Nefilas Apayim rather should be after daybreak. Okay. I think we discussed this a couple of years ago, but never mind. So now we have in our minhagim, it says in Sefer HaMinhagim, that we do not have nefilas apayim during Selichos. I must confess, I've never been for Selichos in a different community, so I've never seen nefilas apayim in the middle of Selichos. But apparently that is the common practice. And in our Selichos, it has a note that we don't ein neuflin. And this in Sefer HaMinhagim, we don't ein neuflin al pneim. Why so? It gives a reference to Magen Avraham and the Alter Rebbe in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph. So, what's the reason? Because it's still Laila. Yeah, we don't want to say Nefilas Apayim whilst it's still Laila. Let's just scroll down the Alter Rebbe Magen Avraham. Kosher, the request from the Rakanati, that Selichos should be drawn out till daybreak, and then you can do Nefilas Apayim. Then he goes on, if Mincha is dragged out till Laila, it's not an issue. Sorry, if it's dragged, he shouldn't do Nefilas Apayim. All right, so this is where the Alter Rebbe came from. So again, so we have here that in the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe has two opinions. One says, Ben Hashmoshes, you can still say Tachanun. The second one says, V'yesh noagim, no. You don't say Tachanun Ben Hashmoshes. Even in the morning, you don't do Nefilas Apayim until after daybreak. So the second opinion is saying we don't say Tachanun when it's a semi-Laila. That's the basis of the Minhag Chabad, that we don't have Nefilas Apayim because it's possibly still Balayla. If that's the case, so the same thing that we don't say Nefilas Apayim in Selichos because it's kind of Suffolk Laila, for the same reason we shouldn't be saying Tachanun Ben Hashmoshes. So although the Alter Rebbe says the first opinion, the Ben Hashmoshes, you can say Tachanun, but I believe that according to the Yesh Neagim, that would mean that you don't say Tachanun Ben Hashmoshes Keminag Ha'olam. I've written about this in detail in the Sefer Halocho Minig, and okay, so I know that's contrary to the general Chabad practice. We say that we still say Tachanun Ben Hashmoshes. I believe that we should be following Keminag Ha'olam, not to be saying Tachanun Ben Hashmoshes. Okay, let's move on. So what about the Tkiyas Shofar? All right, so the Tkiyas Shofar, as I said, is a Chiddush. Okay, nicht gefährlich. But generally, I think that after Tachanun, after Shkia, one shouldn't we say Tachanun? Right. What do we have? The next question. Oh, okay. So there's no screen for this. What happened was that last Shabbos, last Friday night, the Chazan, a particular shul, I don't remember where even, he said after Baruch Atah Hashem Kaddish Shabbos, after Bracha Ben Sheva, he said Kaddish till Amir and Be'alma, and then he said Borchu. And the Olam answered Borchu, Baruch Hashem Averach. And now in our min, we have normally there a Kaddish Shalom, then Mizbel David Hashem Roilech. So then a Kaddish with Borchu. So now what do you do now? So this whole Seder is only in Chabad. In other Sidurim, it's a different Seder. And so I can't even find other Sfarim which talk about it. And my understanding is the following: the reason why we say a mizmer and a kaddish is in order to be justified saying the borchu thereafter. So the borchu at the beginning, and we have Friday night only. We have another borchu at the end, and that's why we say the mizmer to justify a kaddish followed by borchu. Now that you've already done borchu, so there's no need to do anything else. You've already done borchu. The fact that you missed out the second half of the kaddish. Okay, there's nothing. That's not leikuva. So I felt just continue saying Mizmor David and not laying on, and nothing more to be done. Okay, the next question which I have is a very sad one, and that is that there's a Jewish boy who has got into a long-term relationship with a non-Jewish girl, and is getting married to her. Right? That's the plan. His parents are very, very upset about it, but they are in the dilemma. Should they they've already, because of this relationship, because of this relationship with the shiksa, because of this, their relationship with their son has diminished to just 2 phone calls a year. And if they don't come to the wedding, they feel that they'll lose contact with him totally. So they feel that they should come to the wedding. Now, then the son comes to the local Chabad shliach and says, "Can you provide me um, meals for a kosher table at my wedding?" So this is the shliach asked me. It's a dilemma. The young man who's marrying this shiksa is asking, could the shliach provide a table of kosher food for the wedding? So my reaction was they should say, I can't help you. If the individuals come to the Beis Chabad and ask, it's somewhere where there's no regular kosher provision. If they come to the Chabad house and ask, can you give me some food? Fine, but that you should be providing catering for a non for a wedding which is against Torah, I don't think it's justified at all. So I was looking though for a shtickle mocker after all. So we have here, this is a well-known shiur of the Alter Rebbe. And the story is the following. There was a woman who she was given at birth, she was given the name Rochel. However, no one calls her Rochel. Everyone calls her Rashi. And the Alter Rebbe was very upset that this woman got married and divorced, and they gave a get, and they wrote the name Rochel. And that's the name which has been dropped. And therefore that get, Alter Rebbe says, that the get is posel midiraisa, because no one knows her as Rachel, everyone knows her as Rashi. And so the Alter Rebbe goes further in this letter, and he says to do whatever you can to stop the man, never mind the woman, the man he shouldn't marry again until he gives another kosher get to his ex-wife or his wife. And then the Alter Rebbe says further, not only do you have to do whatever you can to stop the man marrying, because the decree of not allowing the man to remarry without giving a get includes that if he wants to remarry, the Shoftim are not allowed to shecht an animal or birds or chickens, whatever. And if the Shoftim violate this, their shechita should be like non-kosher meat. I'm not sure whether he means henceforth or just whatever they shecht for that wedding. So, but what we have here is a case where a man has given an apostle a get to his wife. Now he's remarrying. Well, remarrying is a question of Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom maximum. And yet the Alter Rebbe is so emphatic that no one should be the Shoftim who provide the catering. They would also be seen as assisting in this wedding, which is against Torah, against Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom, and as a result, he says Chitos nevela. So, if that's the case, I think this is no different. To be providing catering for a chasna which is against Torah, I think is not allowed. I know there's in the book Yerushalayim Shel Ma'ala by Menachem Gerlitz, he has a whole story built around this tshuva, but I'm told that Menachem Gerlitz is not necessarily the most authentic source as far as facts go. It's a beautiful story, but I'm not telling you the whole story. It might be just someone's fiction. Okay, that was point number 6. Number 7. So this question, as you can see on the screen, in Chabad, we follow the Minig Arizal, that on the tzitzis of the Tals cotton, so we've got 2 holes, and the tzitzis are threaded through and braided, and so there's like a bridge between the 2 holes. Sometimes a pair of the tzitzis get caught in a chair or something, whatever, and it pulls, and sometimes that bridge is almost snapped. And so the question is, if once it's snapped, if you've got a loose tzitzit in your hand, you can't sew it back because it's become possible. And we've got a concept called tase v'lo min ha'osir b'psul. You have to make the tzitzis, and you cannot take ready-made possible tzitzis and hey presto, you got your tzitzis again. That doesn't work. Here the question is that the tzitzis are literally hanging on a thread. Can that be repaired, or is it really too late? So I several times have told people that so long as it's still attached, it's still considered part of the garment, and you can repair it. And so then, but today, to make up our quota of questions, if you may. So looking here, you have on the from the Piskei Teshuvos, Siman Tesvav, where he writes the following: "Va'afilo lo nishtay mechuber ela kolshehu, v'agdil tolui v'oimid b'oise kolshehu kosher." Even if the tzitzis, which is only hanging literally on a thread, that's still considered part of the original fixing, and therefore you can now, it's still kosher, and you can repair it, and it's still kosher. Okay, that's number 7. Number 8, we have about what's the correct practice regarding the edge of a loaf of bread. So there's a minhag olam of the last bit, or the first bit, not to use, yeah? So this is a tshuva of the Minchas Yitzchok Ravais. This is from a Reb Aaron Vestheim. That's Reb Osher's father, I presume. I heard that one doesn't eat the edge of the loaf of bread, kosher shichacha. Is there a source for this from Shas or other places? So the Ravais says I don't have a source for it, but I also follow this minhag, and it says in Yerushalmi that what people are generally concerned about, conscientious, you should take heed of that. And quite a rashba, and so long as we don't have any reason to object, we should respect a minhag. So that's seems to be the minhag of just a little bit at the edge to not use that piece. Finally, here's the question. Someone asked me to clarify: when people go with mifsoim on Yom Tov, on Rosh Hashanah, how many kailas do you blow? Is it enough to blow tashrat tashat, or do you need to do 30, like you'd have at Kiyas to be yושב? So I'd written about this and taken the position to have to blow 30 kailas, and then today I saw also, this is a contemporary in Geman, in Rechovot, Leib Nachmanson. He wrote a volume called Shalos Teshuvos HaShluchim. He actually has about 10 pages on it. I did not read through the 10 pages today, but he comes to the same conclusion. So here's the question: you're going around in hospitals, etc., and he may not have koyach to blow 30 shakalas at each station. Might not be enough time. Can you perhaps just do tashrat tarat instead of the full set? Like this, you get to more people. Do you do 3 times tashrat or tashrat tarat? So these are his questions. So he comes to the same conclusion that also mivtza shofar, one should blow 30 kailas. And that's because we have a genuine suffix. Whether tashat is correct or tarat is correct, there is a mention in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch or Shittas HaGaonim who say that all of those are correct. I think it's from the Sheiltis, all of them are correct. It's just a different Shinei HaMekoymes. But the Alter Rebbe earlier on follows the Rambam, who says that it's a genuine suffix. You might not be yotze only with tashat, only tasharat, etc. Because it's to be yotze, you have to do all 3, and you have to do all 3 times, and therefore you have to do 3 times tashrat, 3 times tashat, 3 times tarat. And then he finishes off, he says, if he's already tired out and he's not able to do 30 kailas, so then should do at least 3 times tashrat, because then it's only a question of a suffix that the shavorim had mafsik, etc. But then he says, if you're going to do just tashrat, then do so without saying a bracha, because otherwise you're getting into a suffix. Now, does it make a difference whether you're blowing for a man or for a woman? So I would say it doesn't make a difference, because really there's a whole machlokes according to the Rambam. The woman shouldn't be saying a bracha on Tkiyas Shofar. So then, if you're going to do a For a woman, so it has to be a solid provision. Because otherwise, you can say, "Oh, so already a sveka, how you make chal? Who says a woman has to hear, but has to make a bracha on shofar? And now who says it's a proper kiyas?" It makes the case weaker. The fact that a woman hasn't got a chiyuv makes it all the more need to make it to lamed kailas. That's at least my assessment of the story. So that's what I have to share with you this evening, and thank you for joining us. And I wish you a good night, a good Shabbos, and we should see say B'shuv Hashem, Shivas Tzion. Our dream should be fulfilled with seeing Mashiach Tzidkenu, Malkeinu B'Rasheinu, Meher V'Yameinu.